So after the Department of Energy comes out and says that COVID most likely leaked from a lab, we get the likes of The Daily Show, Colbert, liberal pundits saying, yeah, but with low confidence. And come on, who's waiting for the Department of Energy to weigh in on this debate? Well, the issue is the Department of Energy actually oversees biolabs or something to that effect. And that's why they actually did weigh in on this. And that's why their opinion matters the most. But how about this? From the Daily Mail, FBI director agrees with Energy Department report that COVID most likely leaked from Wuhan lab and claims China is thwarting and obfuscating U.S. investigations into the virus. Well, then, I will wait for Stephen Colbert to issue an apology. Now, to be fair, Colbert's take on the lab leak thing, it wasn't the worst thing in the world I've heard. And the Daily Shows, they were both kind of defensive. You know, they didn't want to just come out and be like, okay, we get it. This is most likely the case, as Seamus Coughlin put it. Remember when that city with a virus factory had a virus that was similar to one being made in the virus factory start spreading around the city and then infect the world? And it's like, yeah, it came from the market across the street. Can you believe that people believe that? I mean, I, of course, entertained the possibility because I don't know, man. You know, look, I'm not here to tell you I can see the future or make predictions. But I think it's fair to say if you've got a lab, and I will mention, too, hindsight is 2020. Always consider the context, the contextual circumstances in that what did we know back then versus what did we know now? Based on what we know now, it's really easy to look back and be like, we should have all just said yes. But many of us came out and said, probably makes the most sense at this point, considering that lab is there. But as we learned more about the NIH providing funding, or I'm not sure, it might have been the NIAID, I don't know, whatever, it's like same institution, but Fauci providing funding to EcoHealth Alliance, Peter Daszak, who then provides the funding to the lab to do the gain of function research. Once we learn all of those things, and then it's like, okay, it most likely was the lab, right? Jon Stewart came out and he was talking to Colbert and he said, you know, you've got the Bat Coronavirus Research Center right there, and a bat coronavirus is spreading around. Why would you assume it's anything else? And they mocked him. So Jon Stewart now is coming out and speaking out about this on his podcast, The Problem with Jon Stewart, talking about this issue. We've also got another video, which is really fascinating. These scientists say if the U.S. didn't provide the funding, there would be no question. But as I was saying about Colbert and The Daily Show, the Daily Show actually made a funny point. They said, look, it's just one agency. You still have many other agencies doubting this. And that's a fair point. It's a fair point. But now that the FBI director is coming out and agreeing, I think we're on track to say lab leak confirmed. How about that? The Daily Show ended their segment with actually a really funny bit. The host, I don't know the guy's name or whatever. He was like, it's really funny that all of these liberals came out and they were like, it's racist. I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, it's racist to accuse China of manufacturing a virus causing the pandemic. Instead, accuse them of having disgusting sewer markets where they eat weird animals. I thought that he didn't say it like that, but that's basically it. It's like the left comes out and they're like, you can't blame China for this. That's racist. Blame the disgusting sewer food they eat. And it's like, yo, that's racist. That they got weird mutant viruses emerging from their disgusting sewer markets. Come on, man. It was the laboratory where they put their minds together using their raw intelligence and work ethic to manufacture bioweapons. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what happened. They may have just been doing general gain of function research, and then you get that. And then Colbert actually, he said, you know, look, the Department of Energy oversees these labs. That's why they're weighing in on this one. But there are many other agencies that doubt this. And I'm like, that's a fair point, to be completely honest. I'll give them that one. But common sense dictates if a virus emerges across the street from the virus factory, don't assume it wasn't the virus factory. You know, when you what is this saying? When you hear hoof beats or whatever, when you hear clopping, you don't think zebras, you think horses. So it's like you got a lab that makes viruses. A virus starts coming out. You don't just assume, well, it's probably not the virus lab. It's probably okay. But let me show you a video real quick. This is Tom Elliott tweeting, Dr. Marty McCary, two top virologists warned Fauci about the lab leak in 2020. but changed their tune days later in the media. And then both scientists received $9 million in subsequent funding from the NIH. Check this out.
My next question is, in a recent Energy and Commerce Oversight hearing, I asked the NIH director about the NIH's gross negligence in monitoring the EcoHealth Alliance grant and subgrant at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. After admitting that we might not have all of the information and research reports from the WIV and EcoHealth, he insisted that he was sure that the coronavirus research that the U.S. taxpayer dollars funded at WIV was completely unrelated to SARS-CoV-2. And I was wondering if any of the three of you had any thoughts on that.
This is good stuff.
Thank you,
Dr. Marty McCary.
The reason this is even an issue is that it's embarrassing we funded the lab. If we had not funded the lab, 100% of Americans would say this is obvious, this is a no-brainer. The epicenter of the world is 5 miles from one of the only high-level virology labs in China. The doctors initially were arrested and forced to sign non-disclosure gag documents. The lab reports have been destroyed. They've not been turned over. The sequences reported from the lab to the NIH database were deleted by a request from Chinese scientists that called over early on and said, delete those sequences we put in the database. And two leading virologists, maybe the two top virologists in the United States, Dr. Michael Farzan from Scripps and Dr. Robert Gary from Tulane, told Dr. Fauci on his emergency call in January of 2020, when he was scrambling soon after learning that the NIH was funding the lab, they both said that it was likely from the lab. Both scientists changed their tunes days later in the media, and then both scientists received $9 million subsequent in funding from the NIH. Woo! It's a no-brainer that it came from the lab. I mean, at this point, it's impossible to acquire any more information, and if you did, it would only be affirmative.
All right, how about this one for you? Libertarian Party Mises Caucus tweets, the man on the left is Christian Anderson, a British scientist who emailed Fauci 13120 saying the virus looks lab-made. The man on the right is Christian Anderson, the guy who Fauci called on February 1st, 2020, and ordered to publicly say it wasn't lab-made, which he did. Fauci then gave him a $1.88 million grant and $16 million in funding. How about them apples, huh? How about that? Let's give a shout out to our good friend, Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart recalls outrage after he backed COVID-19 lab leak theory. F you, I'm done. This is a great clip. Let's play this one.
The Department of Energy
this is from the problem,
came out with a report.
The problem with Jon Stewart.
Saying that they said low confidence, but that the COVID-19 was a result of a lab leak.
Are you trying to get me canceled again?
I know. I've gotten so many texts being like, "Is John gloating?"
Do you feel vindicated?
No, there is no. First of all, I wasn't waiting for the Department of Energy to weigh in on it. That's one of those.
You were refreshing the Department of Energy feed.
I got to give a shout out to Stephen Colbert, though, because he's the one who pointed out on his late night show, the Department of Energy oversees biolabs. So Jon Stewart's like, the Department of Energy? What does that mean? It's like, yeah, they do other things. Okay, so, but you know.
What does the Department of Energy
with low confidence?
It's not about certainty, or the larger problem with all of this is the inability to discuss things that are within the realm of possibility without falling into absolutes and litmus testing each other for our political allegiances as it arose from that. My bigger problem with that was I thought it was a pretty good bit that
all right, check this out. This is the important part.
Expressed kind of how I felt. And the two things that came out of it were I'm racist against Asian people and how dare I align myself with the alt-right. And I thought, well, that's such a peculiar, and for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, and God bless you if you don't, I'd gone on Stephen Colbert's show. Stephen is a young up-and-coming improviser.
But I think you get the point. He was told he was racist against Asians, and how dare he align himself with the alt-right. That's it. If you speak common sense and ask basic questions, you're a white nationalist. That's apparently where they're going. That's the idea, I suppose. All right, let's read the news. Let's give a shout out, Jon Stewart. FBI Director Christopher Wray confirmed the agency's conclusion the COVID pandemic was probably the result of a lab leak in Wuhan, China. Really? The agencies? Interesting. Commenting for the first time on Tuesday about the FBI's judgment, Wray reiterated his agency's initial findings from 2021, adding, the Chinese government has allegedly worked to undermine the damning results. The FBI has for quite some time now assessed that the origins of the pandemic are most likely a potential lab incident in Wuhan. Here you are talking about a potential leak from a Chinese government-controlled lab. Now, why is it that anyone would question Jon Stewart, or anybody else for that matter, when they said this, if the FBI's been saying it the whole time? Interesting. Wray's comments come as the White House continues to struggle to come to a consensus on how the virus originated, despite an Energy Department probe coming to the same conclusion as the FBI. And this will be one of Trump's biggest challenges in 2024, in my opinion. Yo, Trump, it looks like the guy who provided funding to the guy who provided funding to Wuhan that leaked, whether accidentally or otherwise, the virus. Hey, that guy worked for you. Now, I get it. Fauci's been in government for a long time, but why didn't you fire him? That to me is absolutely crazy. Donald Trump should have fired Birx, should have fired Fauci, but he wouldn't do it. And that's a challenge for me. Now, with East Palestine, with these videos that Trump is putting out, I think he's stepping up to the plate. It's a bit more traditional than it was back in 2016, but I like what I see. So look, there are challenges right now. You got a lot of people saying that Ron DeSantis is backed by the war machine, by neocons, Jeb Bush types. Why would you support that? And I'm like, I'm not going to judge DeSantis on people around him who like him, because a lot of people like him. Are people going to be like, Tim Pool likes DeSantis too, or Luke Rudkowski? No, that's stupid. They're only highlighting the bad people who like him. What about all the good people who like him? There are a lot of good people who like Ron DeSantis. But let's hold on there a minute. What about who Donald Trump surrounded himself with? Fauci and Birx? Come on. I think we can see from Trump's track record, we got one of the best presidencies. If not, I'll say this, the best president of my lifetime, hands down, period. No questions, none. In terms of foreign policy, no question. In terms of decorum, sure. I mean, you can argue the guy has got a potty mouth, but I look at DeSantis and I don't see that track record. So, if he is going to run, then there is that'll be a challenge for him. But his Florida track record is amazing. It is absolutely amazing. So I'm not going to look at DeSantis and be like the people around him are bad. I'm going to look at what he's done. Now with Donald Trump, he's kept some bad people in. And this will be a big challenge for him, because now that we're learning more and more about this, it's going to come back to haunt him. The dominoes are going to fall, my friends. Right now, lab leak is the next domino to fall. But what comes next? What's the next big conspiracy theory that would be proven to be true? I don't know. I have no idea. But I will tell you this as an aside, totally separate conversation. I was reading this story about some 20-year-old woman who had a heart attack and died in her dad's arms. And another story that said that the reason heart attacks and strokes are affecting young people is because they're on keto diets and they're eating erythritol. Must be all that artificial sweetener, or maybe climate change. But anyway, back to the other story about the lab leak. I wonder what the next domino to fall will be. What is the next conspiracy theory that will turn out to be true? I don't know. Don't ask me. But I will say this. Donald Trump is going to have to answer for the things that happened under his watch. And while he may be the best president in my lifetime, with these things, you're going to have people asking questions. You pushed this treatment or that treatment. These things happened. I'll tell you my hypothesis. We'll cut the innuendo. I have a feeling that as the news comes out about the vaccines, the recent reports about myocarditis and pericarditis, and again, talk to doctors. I'm not trying to give medical advice. I'm saying there have been reports. What's going to happen is Trump's going to keep doubling down because he wants that accomplishment, and the media is going to hold it against him and say, but what about these things or otherwise? What about these stories and this story? They're going to then blame Trump and say, it's your fault. And then they will get half of the conservatives to turn on him. The long game. Maybe. Whether or not vaccines are at issue, the media, in my opinion, will claim all of this stuff. YouTube, as crooked and corrupt as they are, will come out and change the rules and invert them and be like, unless you say, it used to be if you said this, you were banned. Now we're going to make you say the other thing. And if you don't say the other thing, then you're banned. You see how they're going to do it? I wouldn't be surprised because YouTube keeps changing their rules. If they come out in a year and they're like, if you don't blame Donald Trump for this, that, or otherwise, well, then you're pushing medical misinformation. How much you want to bet? But here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with the FBI coming out and being like, oh, yeah, lab leak? Yeah, of course. Now, of course, the FBI has been saying this for some time, but aren't they isn't the Federal Bureau of Investigation probably the best assessor? I suppose if you say like the NSA and the CIA are like, nah, we're not so sure. But at this point, I think that that doctor over there, Marty McCary, hit the nail on the head with the hammer. A Johns Hopkins professor, MD, MPH, saying if it wasn't for our funding, 100% of Americans would be saying it was a lab leak. But so how does this happen? Where's the common sense go? The media, funded by special interests, they come out and they just say you're alt-right, you're racist, and you're a conspiracy theorist if you believe the obvious. Or if you at least believe the obvious is the more likely answer. I love it. Occam's razor. In the absence of evidence, the solution that makes the least amount of assumptions tends to be correct. There's a city with a biolab, BSL-4. They do research on coronaviruses, bat coronaviruses. A bat coronavirus escaped and started infecting humans. Or I should say, a bat coronavirus started infecting humans. We don't have a video or direct evidence of whatever that link is. We don't have the sequencing data because, as he said, they got rid of it. But the least amount of assumptions is the city with the virus factory probably accidentally released the virus. Or I should say, I shouldn't even say accidentally because that makes an assumption. We just don't know for sure. So, my friends, how many people do you know desperately tried to cling on to that narrative? I had a friend of mine a week or two ago who was just like, we're driving in the car and they were saying like, I think it probably just came from the wet market. And I'm like, so you think that the virus, which originated in bats, which emerged across the street from a lab that researches bat coronaviruses, did not leak the virus and that it emerged accidentally because someone traveled 1,000 miles to pick up a bat brought to a wet market across the street from the bat virus factory? Come on, man. It's like, are you just trying to sound like you fit in? Do you have original thoughts that you can stand up on and say, this is what I believe. I don't care if you don't agree. That's where we need to be. Okay. Now for me, look, guys, I'll tell you, if I don't know, I'll say I think something is likely or probable. And if I think the evidence suggests it's true, I'll say the evidence suggests it's true. What I don't like doing is coming out and being like, I know definitively and it's a fact. That I just don't like. So we'll drop the innuendo from earlier. I think potentially the next domino to fall might be the adverse effects from vaccines. I don't know for sure. I'm not a doctor. And I'm not going to come out and tell you that there is something that's definitive unless I have evidence, hard evidence. There have been some studies about myocarditis and pericarditis, and there have been warnings issued by, prominent medical organizations. Talk to a doctor who knows about this stuff because they'll give you the better advice. But I'm telling you, I wouldn't be surprised if they come out and say, oh, all of these adverse events, that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the one who pushed it. It's his fault. How much you want to bet? Because they will sacrifice. Well, they don't have memory. These people who are willing to just say whatever, it's like they forget everything. It's like, yo, you guys were making fun of the people who thought it came from the lab, which made the most sense. And now you're like, oh, wow, would you look at that? I have to wonder sometimes. It really does feel like we're in a simulation. Hey, I worked that one in, right? That there are people who are mindless zombies. They're NPCs. Remember the Great Meme War? 2016, Donald Trump gets elected. The Great Meme War. It was crazy because you get the NPC meme that implies there are people who are non-player characters. They're not really there. They're not thinking. They're not functioning. And then you look around at all these people who are like, I think it probably didn't come from the lab because CNN said so. And you're like, dude, are you joking? How could you conclude that? It makes me wonder. It does. And how many people are hiding? How many people believe a lot of things and they won't say it publicly? I'll say this. The good news is there have been some prominent athletes and celebrities who have privately messaged me before saying they won't speak up because they'll lose their jobs. And I now see them tweeting. Now I see them tweeting, dipping their toes in. It's starting to feel safe. That's the point. As long as we do videos like this, as long as y'all share videos like this, as long as y'all speak up yourselves, which is more important, more people will feel safer and comfortable to come out and say what is the obvious, what makes the most sense. But I'll tell you, the pressure of cancel culture is real. You got a lot of people who work in these companies that will, get woke and go broke or whatever. And I think people on the right who aren't subjected to that don't understand how scary and terrifying and nerve-wracking it is when Antifa shows up to your house, banging on the windows, screaming, launching fireworks at you and things like that. So people just bend to the terrorism. It's time we stop. Just stop. Surprise, surprise. The FBI saying the same thing. Okay. Well, good for Jon Stewart. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.